Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I move that today we honour the Indigenous peoples of this land, the oldest continuing cultures in human history. We reflect on their past mistreatment. We reflect in particular on the mistreatment of those who were stolen generations, this blemished chapter in our national history. The time has now come for the nation to turn a new page in Australia's history by righting the wrongs of the past and so moving forward with confidence to the future. We apologise for the laws and policies of successive parliaments and governments that have inflicted profound grief, suffering and loss on these our fellow Australians. We apologise especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities and their country, for the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants and for their families left behind. We say sorry. To the mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry. And for the indignity and degradation thus inflicted on a proud people and a proud culture, we say sorry. We, the Parliament of Australia, respectfully request that this apology be received in the spirit in which it is offered, as part of the healing of the nation. For the future, we take heart, resolving that this new page in the history of our great continent can now be written. We today take this first step by acknowledging the past and laying claim to a future that embraces all Australians. A future where this Parliament resolves that the injustices of the past must never, never happen again. A future where we harness the determination of all Australians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to close the gap that lies between us and life expectancy, educational achievement and economic opportunity. A future where we embrace the possibility of new solutions to enduring problems where old approaches have failed. A future based on mutual respect, mutual resolve and mutual responsibility. A future where all Australians, whatever their origins, are truly equal partners with equal opportunities and with an equal stake in shaping the next chapter in the history of this great country, Australia. Mr. Speaker, there comes a time in the history of nations when their peoples must become fully reconciled to their past if they are to go forward with confidence to embrace their future. Our nation, Australia, has reached such a time, and that is why the Parliament is today here assembled, to deal with this unfinished business of the nation, to remove a great stain from the nation's soul, and in a true spirit of reconciliation, to open a new chapter in the history of this great land, Australia. Mr. Speaker, last year I made a commitment to the Australian people that if we form the next government of the Commonwealth, we would in Parliament say sorry to the stolen generations. Mr. Speaker, today I honour that commitment. I said we would do so early in the life of the new Parliament. Mr. Speaker, again today I honour that commitment by doing so at the commencement of this, the 42nd Parliament of the Commonwealth. Because the time has come, well and truly come, for all peoples of our great country, for all citizens of our great Commonwealth, for all Australians, those who are Indigenous and those who are not, to come together, to reconcile, and together build a new future for our nation. Some have asked, why apologise? Let me begin to answer by telling the Parliament just a little of one person's story. An elegant, eloquent and wonderful woman in her 80s, full of life, full of funny stories, despite what has happened in her life's journey. A woman who has travelled a long way to be with us today. A member of the stolen generation who shared some of her story with me when I called round to see her just a few days ago. Nana Nungalo Fijo, as she prefers to be called, was born in the late 1920s. She remembers her earliest childhood days, living with her family and her community in a bush camp just outside Tennant Creek. She remembers the love and the warmth and the kinship of those days long ago, including traditional dancing around the campfire at night. She loved the dancing. She remembers once getting into strife when, as a 4-year-old girl, she insisted on dancing with the male tribal elders, rather than just sitting and watching the men, as the girls were supposed to do. But then, sometime around 1932, when she was about 4, she remembers the coming of the welfare men. Her family had feared that day and had dug holes in the creek bank where the children could run and hide. What they hadn't expected was that the white welfare men didn't come alone. They brought a truck, they brought 2 white men and an Aboriginal stockman on horseback, cracking his stock whip. The kids were found. They ran for their mothers, screaming, but they couldn't get away. They were herded and piled onto the back of the truck. Tears flowing, her mum tried clinging to the sides of the truck as her children were taken away to the bungalow in Alice, all in the name of protection. A few years later, government policy changed. Now the children would be handed over to the missions to be cared for by the churches. But which church would care for them? The kids were simply told to line up in 3 lines. Nana Fijo and her sisters stood in the middle line, her older brother and cousin on her left. Those on the left were told that they had become Catholics. Those in the middle, Methodists, and those on the right, Church of England. That's how the complex questions of post-Reformation theology were resolved in the Australian outback in the 1930s. It was as crude as that. She and her sister were sent to a Methodist mission on Goulburn Island and then Croker Island. Her Catholic brother was sent to work at a cattle station and her cousin to a Catholic mission. Nana Fijo's family had been broken up for a second time. She stayed at the mission until after the war, when she was allowed to leave for a pre-arranged job as a domestic in Darwin. She was 16. Nana Fijo never saw her mum again. After she left the mission, her brother let her know that her mum had died years before, a broken woman, fretting for the children that had literally been ripped away from her. I asked Nana Fijo what she would have me say today about her story. She thought for a few moments, then said that what I should say today was that all mothers are important. And she added, families, keeping them together is very important. It's a good thing that you are surrounded by love and that love is passed down the generations. That's what gives you happiness. As I left later on, Nana Fijo took one of my staff aside, wanting to make sure that I wasn't too hard on the Aboriginal stockman who'd hunted those kids down all those years ago. The stockman had found her again decades later, this time himself to say sorry. And remarkably, extraordinarily, she had forgiven him.